Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about 6 easy to implement SEO tips for your Drupal website. I have implemented these on high traffic websites in the past and I have seen a lot of positive results. So I would like to share with you so you can also have these improvements on your Drupal website. If you have not implemented these already, I highly recommend you do, as you can see significant gains with minimal effort. Okay, so let's dive right in. The first one that I would like to talk about is the Drupal SEO checklist. Now, a lot of you would know some of these things that I'm going to mention, but I would like to go in a bit more detail about some of these. Right? And I put a screenshot here of the module, a screenshot from the module page. So you can see that, for example, there are 17,000 reported sites already using this module. So it's fairly popular. I like to see how many sites is using a module before I actually install it. It kind of gives an idea of, like if there were issues with the module, there will be much more people that can fix the issue as opposed to a module with only 10, 15, 20 sites using it, right? Then if there's an issue in that case, you're probably going to have to like fix it yourself or hire someone to fix it. Okay, so this module, the SEO checklist module, will scan your website and provide you with a checklist of low-hanging fruit that you can easily implement. It literally tells you what you need to do to improve your technical SEO. The module is very well documented on the module page, and I will put links for everything in the description. Keep in mind, this module will give you ideas around technical on-site SEO only. For such things as content optimization and marketing strategy, etc., you need to do this elsewhere or like hire SEO agency, for example. This module really gives you a good headway into what you need to concentrate on to improve your Drupal website for SEO purposes. I'm not going to list out everything that it checks because it is quite a lot, but here are some main things that I would like to show you. So I have the module uh, already installed on a test site here, and you can see. So let me start from the top again. So you go to manage configuration. I'm assuming here that you already installed the module. This tutorial is not about installing modules specifically, but assuming that you already have the module installed, it will be under configuration, search and metadata, and SEO checklist. And here you can see, let me just get this out of the way. Okay, here you can see they categorize it into these tabs, and each one of these tabs will give you a lot of options to consider, right? So here it gives you some really general stuff, like make sure you have, a coffee module and composer and drush and so on. These are just a lot of common stuff. And this tab gives you stuff relating to clean URLs. So you want to make sure you have that enabled, and whatever else here is relevant to your site. I like to enable redirect and path auto, also path auto patterns as well. This tab will give you everything related to meta tags. You can explore some of these options. Here's everything you need to know about search engines, robot.txt file, setting up cron, and so on. Google Tag Manager, XML Sitemap. So as you like install these things and you check them off, you notice the progress bar advances, right? And so it gives you an idea of like how much things remaining that you need to do. Here's everything related to optimizing content. There's a lot of stuff in here as well. Here's everything for on-page optimization, security and performance, which is always important for any website. Everything related to social and media, and here's some stuff for giving back to the module. So what I would like to say is like you don't need to implement every single one of this, but implement the ones that are relevant to your site, right? Okay, so moving on. The advanced CSS/JS aggregation module. Again, a very popular module. You can see more than 54,000 sites report using this module. One thing I would like to say is beware that do not just like blindly enable everything that you see in this module, right? While you may see some improvements, certain features can break your site, especially if you use a lot of JavaScript. So it is recommended that you enable one feature at a time and test. And you want to test on an instance or server that is closely representative of your live instance, right? So testing on your local host is not the most ideal way to test. You want to test on like a staging server, for example. Right. So the CSS aggregation module provides a lot of significant gains with minimal effort. Testing these, okay, okay. So this module is well documented on the module page. Please go there if you need like more detailed explanation on what the module does exactly. So at a high level, I would say that it does like you can enable things like DNS fetching or DNS pre-fetching. There's like advanced Drupal caching. So, for example, if you use like a display advertising network like Ezoic, for example, you might want to play around with the settings and the advanced caching. Don't set it too high because it might break something. So you start with like a low setting and then test, advance to slightly higher test until the point that it breaks, and then you know, okay, you can't go that high, right? There's different compression options such as gzip broadly. There's additional CSS JavaScript aggregation options on top of what Drupal core already offers. Okay, so I could show if you go to extend here, you can see I already installed the module, and there's some sub modules that comes with it, right? I like to use bundler. I like to use minify CSS, minify JavaScript, and also, well, CSS aggregation, of course. So let's see the settings for that in the backend. So you go to development, and where is it? Oops, sorry. Here it is. Okay, get this out of the way. All right. So based on what you enable, you have different settings. And here's where I was talking about the advanced cache settings. So you should start with like low, test, and then work your way up. Usually, like normal is where you want to go. If you're really adventurous, you can try high. I have tried high before and it didn't break a lot of things, but in some cases it did. So in cases where you use a lot of JavaScript, for example, like as I said before, display advertising, you might want to test that if you enable the high option. Here you have the compression options, so gzip and broadly. I'm doing this on my local host, so I don't have broadly installed, but if you did have broadly installed on your server, you would be able to enable this. You have like some CSS aggregation options and some JS options as well. Um, Under the operations tab, you can more or less leave this to the default. um, the bundler, right? So here's where you could bundle CSS files based on like the number of files, like file count or the file size. So typically you set this to like one or two, and you use file count, right? Um, Now JavaScript button is an interesting one. So you can set this to one and or two and put it on a file count, but that is not always the most optimal case, especially if you have a lot of JavaScript. So how do you know what to use here? So I'll give you a quick tip here. So this is what I like to do. So you go to Google Page Speed, right? I'm just going to like maximize this so you can see better. So let's analyze Drupal.org, for example, right? Now, most of you might think like, enabling putting this to one and then setting a file count is the best, and that should work for every site. But I've found that that is not always the case. So let's just give this some time to finish here, and I will show you what you need to look for so that you can play around with these settings. And as a reminder, like when you test this, you should ideally test this on a staging server or a server that closely mimics your production server, right? So for any website, you want to look at what is it called? Reduce JavaScript execution. So here, this one, right? So here, if we third party sometimes is out of your control, especially if you have like display advertising. So you can uncheck that, and here's where you have like sorry, all your local JavaScript, and you have it takes a total of 31 milliseconds to compute. Evaluation time, is this amount of time, and script parsing is this amount of time. So you want to like set this to like one, for example, based on file count, and then rerun this test and look at the changes, right? It's 2.6 seconds right now. And then you could test it at like 5, for example, and then save that and then rerun this test and see if there was any difference. And then you kind of have to like do trial and error until you find like the right number where they you want to bring the CPU time down essentially, um, but not having too many files, right? So you want to find that balance. So it's a kind of like trial and error. And then you have a CSS minification. Based on what you have installed on your server, you'll have different options here. Um, JavaScript, same as well. Based on what you have installed on your server, you have more options here as well. So this is a very common module. A lot of people use it, but it's a bit dangerous because it can break your site if you just turn everything on, right? Don't turn everything on. Okay. So the next one, XML Sitemap. So again, very popular module. More than 200,000 sites report using this. I've already installed it. So let's take a look at it. Go to configuration, search metadata, XML sitemap. So in the settings, you can the default is mostly okay. Um, what I want to show you is really the entities that you can enable it. So you can enable it for everything, which is articles, for example. Save it, and then it builds a sitemap, and the sitemap is available at the root slash sitemap.xml. Well, I haven't run the cron as yet, so it didn't build my sitemap. But if I did, it would be available here. And that is not the end of the story. So after you build the sitemap, what you want to do is go to Google Search Console and also Bing Webmaster Tools, and you want to enter this sitemap URL. It will be like your full URL of your site slash sitemap.xml. You want to enter that into Google Search Console and the sitemap page, and also in Bing Webmaster Tools. So what will happen there is when your sitemap is updated, your Drupal site would basically ping Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster and let them know like, hey, my sitemap has been updated. You might want to like recrawl again, or here are the things that have been updated since the last update. That is a very important step if you want your content indexed, as soon as possible. Okay, so moving on. What did I? Okay, yeah. So here is another one that I like to do on some sites. It doesn't work for every site. Um, so in your html.html.twig, um, you want to move the CSS placeholder token to the top. You want it to be the very first thing at the top. This is done because CSS is a render blocking resource when the browser loads a page, and ideally you want the browser to load render blocking resources as soon as possible. There's one thing to be careful about though. Be careful of it's called charset declaration is missing or occurs too late in the HTML. And I put a link here if you want to read more information on that. But essentially what it is the head placeholder token, there's this one that you see here, it outputs this meta charset attribute, which tells the browser, use this to parse the page basically. And according to like HTML rules, this has to be very high or very close to the beginning or within the first, I think it's 1,200, 1,048, within the first 1,048 bytes of the page. If you go to this link, you'll get more information about that. But you want this to be as high as possible. So this would only work like if you move the CSS to the top, it would only work like if you just have like two or three maximum CSS files. If you have more than that, then you run over the limit, and then you run into this problem. So yeah, so if you set the CSS bundler to 3, and that should be fine. But let's say like later down the road, another developer on your team wants to change it to some other value, or you load more CSS in the future. You always have to remember to keep an eye on this, because you might forget, and you're going to run into issues later on if you do. When you do set it like this, the CSS is the first thing that is loaded by the browser, because it's the most important thing, well, one of the most important things that the browser has to render before it actually loads the page, right? So this will definitely increase your Google page speed score as well. Okay, the next one. Yeah, so the next one is do not load unnecessary libraries. So some contrib modules, um, they load some external libraries by default. I'm not sure why they would want to do that, but they do. Okay, so here are two examples: add to any and the better make a menu. And I put links to issues where in the issue queue where these modules are trying not to load these libraries automatically, right? You could read these links for more information. So you can use Chrome Inspector tool to see what external libraries are being loaded. You need to track these libraries down to see which module is actually loading it. Then determine if it is actually needed or not. If you determine that it is actually not needed, an easy way to override it is this code that I have right here. So in your theme.info file, you want a libraries.dash override declaration, and here is the contrib module that you would put, and you want to override the CSS, and here's the link to the actual CSS file that you want to override, and you set it to false. So this will essentially just not load the CSS file ever on the site, right? You can also use hook page attachments alter, and in that function you can check the path, then you determine if you need to load the library on that path, and then you just unset it. That's another way that you can not load libraries. I know that these two modules, they do provide these like external libraries. For example, add to any, it loads the add to any CSS and JavaScript on like if once you install that module, it loads it on every page on your site, even if you use the module on that page or not. And I particularly don't like that because there's no need to load extra libraries if you're not going to use it, right? I'm pretty sure there are more modules as well that do that. So you need to like use Chrome Inspector to see what is going on your site. The next one, last but certainly not least, lazy load your images. Right. So here's some code for very easy and quick implementation. I'm showing you s- I'm showing you this implementation because it's the laziest way to implement lazy loading. It's a pun intended there. but it may not always work in all situations. So if you go into your hook preprocessed image in your custom theme file, you can implement this function and just set attribute load and lazy, and that will lazy load all images across your site. When I say all images, I mean all images that comes from field entities. So if you have an image field in your content type, if you have an image field in like a profile, for example, or a paragraph field or view field, for example, it would lazy load all of those. It will not lazy load CSS background images. One thing that you want to be careful about here is that if you have images coming from these fields that are above the fold, this technique will lazy load those images as well, which is actually counterproductive. Ideally, if you have images above the fold, you, you should not lazy load those. So it depends on your design of your site. So if you use an image from an image field, like in a content type, for example, and that image just happens to be above the fold, if you implement it using this method, it will lazy load that image, which is counterproductive. A better technique is to lazy load images on a per field basis. So let me show you how that would look. So, for example, let's say you have a content type and with an image field, right? Like here, for example, you can go to manage display and look at the image field, and it's in Drupal core now, and you can set the image loading here. You can set it to lazy, you can set it to eager. If you don't set it, it takes eager by default. So let's say you know that this image is going to appear above the fold, you can just like set it to eager here, right? It's a very, very quick and easy way to implement lazy load, and you don't need to like lazy loading comes in default in browsers nowadays, so you don't need to like implement other things like be lazy or use these other lazy loading libraries anymore. Like in the past we used to use these things, right? Because the browser didn't have lazy loading by default, but now browsers do. So it's not like required to use this thing. You could eliminate those modules by just using this technique, and that way you get lazy loading and also you decrease the amount of JavaScript that runs on your site. So it's like win-win situation actually. Okay, and that those were the 6 tips, and I I hope I will put like, all the links in the description. I'm not a graphics design artist, so my presentation, it looks a bit boring. There's not much colors, but I want to provide like real high value content for you. So I hope this video would give you some insight into things that you can implement in your own project. I do plan to do more videos like this. This is my very first video, so please like and subscribe, and you can get notified when I do more videos in the future. If you have any comments or questions about any of the things I discussed, you feel free to leave a comment and I will try to reply as fast as I can. Until next time, thank you very much.